Gildan Media presents Your Coach in a Box. Affordable, mind-enriching programs.
Gildan Audio presents an unabridged recording of The How of Wow, a guide to giving a speech that will positively blow 'em away, by Tony Carlson, narrated by Don Hagen. Prologue. Rising Above the Crowd. Every working day in North America, more than 10,000 people get up on their hind legs and deliver speeches. 25 minutes later, 9,998 are forgotten by everyone except perhaps the speech giver, the writer, and the speech giver's subordinates, such as sound and fury signifying nothing. A pebble dropped into the Marianas Trench leaves as lasting an impression. So what? The audience eats a passable, if lukewarm, meal, downs a glass of house wine, groans at a bad joke, and toddles off back to work or to the next conference session, as mildly diverting as another rerun of Friends, and infinitely less painful than a colonoscopy. Everybody's happy, right? Really? Consider this. Estimates vary, but some observers figure the conference business in the United States alone is worth $120 billion a year. That's a lot of the long green being snoozed away by people bored by biz speak and blinded by punchless PowerPoint. I can hear what you're thinking, that the real work of conferences doesn't go on during the speeches and panel sessions. It happens in the corridors and over dinners and in the hotel rooms. That's where the deals are hatched and consummated. That's where the value lies. Maybe. The bland leading the bland. But hundreds of thousands of people still sit through the parade of mediocrity that inhabits platforms across the land. We in the audience are often bored, itching to get to the real business, or pleasure, just over the horizon of the next keynote yawn. You have to ask why, and the answer, most times, is because that's the way it has always been. With few exceptions, public speeches, especially by business leaders, have been allowed to become the elevator music of the communications world. They barely impinge on conscious thought. Pleasant enough, but would you really miss them if they weren't there? What a waste, in so many ways. It's not that the speakers or the writers or the graphic artists are dumb. Many are highly competent, even brilliant at what they do. Yet they opt for the safe harbor of formulaic style and substance. Conventional wisdom rules. Edgy ideas are few and far between. They state and restate the obvious. But truth be told, boring speeches were the rule long before anyone had heard of Enron. My theory? People don't understand what a powerful tool they have at their disposal when they're on the podium. Public speaking is such an ingrained fear in so many of us that we just want to get it over and done with. Why prolong the ordeal? If you pay little attention to it, maybe you can avoid sleepless nights, or worse, those awful dreams where you walk to the microphone only to remember you're still in your pajamas, or less. Allowing mediocrity. Then, too, many speakers depend on a docile audience, all too willing to yawn through the monotony, aiding and abetting a let's-get-it-over-with approach, or making allowances in sympathy for the poor devil whose number has come up and who has to actually give the speech. It's a wonder why audiences don't expect and demand more for their money, even if it is the virtually weightless expense account kind of currency. It's a wonder they let speakers get away with pointing to a slide and saying, "As you can see here," when they really can't see anything if they're more than 4 rows from the front. Thanks to our rigorous focus on managing capital inputs and operational expenses and on driving high-margin product lines, our EBITDA growth jumped almost 0.5% to 4.35% in Q2 of this year compared to the similar period for last year, a stark contrast to the negative growth, negative growth, we experienced in the perfect storm that hit the high-tech sector in the 2 years prior. But it's not just the money. Bill Jensen, the principal of the New Jersey-based Jensen Group Leadership Consultancy, tells his audiences the single most important number in business is 1,444. That's the number of minutes in a day, the number of minutes each of us has to spend, a number that remains constant regardless of the state of the economy, world peace, or the Mets bullpen. It's a non-renewable resource that we cannot afford to waste. Think how grateful an audience would be if the speaker respected the importance of their time by delivering some real insight, if not enlightenment, some meaning where once was only data. If the speaker offered fewer platitudes but more attitude, sought to elicit more of the "I've never thought of it that way" kind of response, less of the "been there, heard that" déjà vu. Insight, enlightenment, meaning, stimulation, wit, entertainment. That's what I look for when I open a magazine or a book or a website. It's what I crave when I fork over $14 for a movie or $90 a month for digital television, cable, or satellite. Should a speaker expect to make an impact, be memorable if he or she delivers less? Yet that is what so often happens. This powerful tool of communication is devolving into a kind of beige wallpaper, inoffensive to anyone, to be sure, but ultimately forgettable, and probably before the audience returns to their cubicles back at the office. Question is, what shall we do about it? Over the last 20 years, I have had the opportunity to see thousands of people give speeches and presentations. I've written hundreds more. I struggle to remember even a Homer Simpson handful of them, even those that arose from my own fevered keyboard. More often than not, I've been underwhelmed by the sameness, depressed by the knowledge that there's another 20 minutes of my life I've spent with no return on the investment and no chance of getting them back. Yet I have also had the privilege to work with a number of senior executives who frequented the speaking platforms of a wide variety of venues, from academic and business conferences to parliamentary and congressional hearings. In that work, thanks to some insightful and even courageous individuals who actually agreed to speak the words I put in their mouths, we occasionally broke through the swamp of mediocrity, homogeneity, and just plain dullness that afflicts the majority of speeches today. We started with the notion that any time one is asked to get up to speak formally, it is an opportunity, not something to be got through. It is an opportunity not only for the organization the speaker represents, but also, and probably more important, a virtual carte blanche for the speaker to take the bushel basket off his or her own light. Not all of these speakers were comfortable with public speaking. Few people are. But the best of them rose above the personal ordeal of standing intellectually naked in front of often critical strangers, because they understood what they had to gain by being memorable. In an internet-driven world where the flood of available information is rising at an unprecedented rate, where graphics and streaming video add vivid new dimensions to often dry data, it's getting even tougher to be memorable when you stand up in front of a live audience. But it can be done, and that's what this audiobook is about. About this audiobook. Part 1 addresses the most important question. What's in it for you as a speaker? Why should you care about being memorable on the podium in the first place? And it sets the stage for breaking through the noise to really connect with your audience. Part 2 looks at that critical period between receiving the invitation and getting down to the actual writing. In Part 3, we look at the ongoing preparation you need to do to really excel on the podium and cover 5 ways to connect with the audience from the first moments at the microphone. Part 4 tackles the nuts and bolts of the speech, how to give shape and substance to your subject, and then express yourself in clear, impactful language. After the writing is done, it's time to deliver, and that's what Part 5 covers, from preparation of the delivery copy to establishing a memorable persona on the dais. Finally, Part 5 also looks at one of the most sadly neglected areas of speech-making, what to do after the talking is done, with ideas to market and repackage the material to make the most of your investment in it. In the end, this audiobook is not about getting the data right. It's not about delivering messages. It's not about overcoming stage fright. It's about connecting with a live audience from the moment you hear about the speaking opportunity until long after the applause has long died down. You'll learn, for instance, why the traditional model for speeches is a roadmap to forgettability, and why slides and videos are, at best, the most overrated gimmick since the push-button transmission in the 1957 Plymouth Fury. I am under no illusion that this audiobook covers every possible strategy for you to stand out on the platform. I am also well aware that not all of the suggestions and guidelines offered here are applicable all the time for every speaker. My hope for you is that after listening to this audiobook, you will understand the dynamic that exists in and around the speech-giving process, you will see the benefits of standing out on the platform, and you'll be more insistent that you do just that when the opportunity arises. Give the audience a memory. Make them say, "Wow." Part 1. Why should you care? Glory is fleeting, but obscurity is forever. Napoleon Bonaparte. 1. Take off the bushel basket. Proposition. Most speeches are dull, forgettable. Response. So what? Why should we care? It's not hard to imagine a busy executive's rebuttal. Giving speeches is really low on my list of priorities when I have more empowered board members looking over my shoulder, not to mention the SEC and other enforcement agencies, and customers whose expectations are becoming more and more demanding, that is, unrealistic. So what if I fulfill my obligation and fill 20 minutes or a half an hour, or even an hour with some slides and numbers? Yes, numbers are always good. It's not brain surgery. No one dies. True. But since when has settling for good enough ever been a winning strategy? And depending on your point of view, there are some pretty interesting answers to so what. Building the personal brand. There's really only one place to begin when talking about points of view, with yourself. What's in it for you to take a risk, to stand out from the safe crowd on the podium? Egocentric? Maybe. But human nature. And after all, there aren't too many Albert Schweitzers around. What's in it for you? The answer is simple. Delivering memorable speeches and presentations is a powerful tool to build your own personal brand. You can make your name by working on your presentation skills. And if you have ambitions of succeeding to the senior levels of any organization, public or private sector, you need a name people know and respect. And that depends on approaching the preparation and delivery of a speech not as an obligation, but as an opportunity. There you are, the last speaker on the last panel of the day. Just one person stands between the audience and the bar, you. Or you're the last-minute guest at the monthly Kiwanis supper and business meeting. The temptation to get in and get out as quickly and quietly as possible is strong. But even in these instances, perhaps especially in these instances, you have a chance to show what you're made of, as an expert in your field, and just as important, as a person. On a beige canvas, even a dash of color makes an impact, becomes memorable. If I'm asked to speak, and I've got a few dozen or 100 captive souls in a room, and no one's talking except me, I can be that color. I can be memorable. Am I going to get a better chance to show what I can do? Not often. Same thing in the boardroom or sales presentations or service club luncheons. All chances to stand out. This is not the time to say to ourselves, well, if we can get through the 20 minutes without fainting or otherwise embarrassing ourselves, mission accomplished. Woody Allen was just kidding when he said 80% of life is just showing up. Did Columbus turn back after he saw land, or did he come ashore? We don't remember Neil Armstrong for circling the moon, although he did. We remember him for landing. When else do you have the floor? When else can you make your colleagues envious, your bosses take notice, and your audience see you and your cause in an entirely new and radiant light? What makes a good speaker also makes a very promotable individual. People often pay only lip service to the importance of communication skills, especially in organizations dominated by engineers or other technical disciplines. But the fact is that any organization is essentially a human enterprise, and the communication between and among those humans is both the glue that holds it together and the fuel that drives innovation and growth. It's what the patron saint of management, Peter Drucker, was getting at when he called management a social function and a liberal art. Management is about human beings. Every enterprise is composed of people with different skills and knowledge doing many different kinds of work. It must be built on communication and on individual responsibility. Communication and individual responsibility. Two concepts that come together on the platform in the person of the speaker who demonstrates, in real time, his or her personal commitment. They are made real through the words and ideas in the speaker's mouth, and just as important, in the implicit messages that flow from the willingness to stand up and do something that is in the top 3 of things people hate to do: speak in front of a crowd. One still has to be able to deliver all the other goods that executives need: financial, technical, sales skills, whatever. But you also must make sure other people know you can do all that stuff, especially people beyond your immediate circle of influence, and that means building a personal brand. In turn, that means demonstrating that great intangible, leadership. Senior executives, no matter the organization, not only must be capable in their craft, but must also have the courage to lead. For it does take courage. Leadership is not about maintaining the status quo. It is about going into uncharted territory in pursuit of a well-articulated view of life. It is about having, as Colin Powell has said, the willingness to piss people off, to ask the unaskable question, to voice the unpopular idea. It takes courage just to get up and talk in front of people. Doing it well, taking the audience places they haven't been, takes even more, but the rewards are worth it. And ask yourself this: how tough can it be? Given the wasteland of dullness on daisies from coast to coast to coast, it's not that big a stretch to think that you might make an enormous impact. In the company of munchkins, even Tom Cruise looks tall. Someone who really knows what to do can seem to be a giant, and use that to establish a personal brand that translates into an entirely new level of success. All it takes is the mindset to see the opportunity, the will to go after it, and some understanding of what makes a speech work, because good ones, as rare as they may be, do. Bland does nothing for brand. Of course, there are other answers to the what's in it for you question, important reasons to want to be memorable beyond building your personal brand. Think about what your speeches mean to your organization's brand, a mission-critical element of business in today's increasingly commoditized world. First, it's clear that, in the wake of the dot-gones, consumers of all sorts are placing more confidence in trusted brands. As hundreds of upstart companies failed in the first 3 years of this century, whether because of unrealistic business plans or plain and simple crooked accounting, people searched for companies that had stood the test of time and had the resources to be around for another long period. So today, like never before, brand is a critical success driver. Without going through Marketing 101, it's common knowledge that brand with an uppercase B is composed of a variety of inputs. Price is one. Just ask Walmart how it got to be the world's largest company. Penetration is another. There may be a Target or a Kmart in every town, but you have to look a little harder for a Bloomingdale's or Saks Fifth Avenue. And once you find it, you're willing to pay more than you would at the Filene's around the corner. Go figure. But a large element, perhaps the most important element of brand, is emotional. That connection the customer or potential customer or former customer makes with the idea of your organization. I had a great experience with my first Honda Civic and have been loyal ever since, not just for the quality of the product, but for the non-logical connection I made with the company, an upstart in North America at the time, a producer of environmentally friendly gas misers, good for getting from point A to point B, and not much else. Conversely, my wife and I had nothing but trouble with a used Aspen station wagon we bought when the kids came along. The brand name conjured up visions of carefree times at an upscale mountain resort, or a beautiful tree whose silver-backed leaves define summer along many a rural laneway. The reality of our Aspen wagon, not so much. Obviously, it was just one lemon among how many thousands of good Dodge cars, but it planted a negative brand association and influenced my car-buying decisions ever since. That's why organizations pay so much attention to every aspect of their business as it is seen by customers. Customer service reps are trained incessantly. Every word of ad copy, every color in the illustration or backdrop in the TV commercial, every model's expression, ethnicity, and demeanor are ruthlessly pored over. The look and feel of brochures, the look and location of offices and stores, the look and lifespan of the logo, are all intensely scrutinized because marketers know that each element has the potential to build or undermine the all-important brand. By contrast, speakers and speeches fly out the door after relatively cursory consideration. The speaker pays attention, of course, maybe a writer if the speaker is senior enough, a senior PR person and a couple of subject matter experts, the VPs and managers who know how many widgets the company can churn out in a 24-hour period. Don't get me wrong. There's lots of effort, lots of busy work and heavy sighs as people shuffle cliches about. But more often than not, the unspoken premise is, how do we get through this without creating trouble? How do we fulfill the obligation and still stay under the radar? Where's the logic in that? The fact is that the speaker, any speaker, is the organization's brand incarnate. He or she is going to affect brand awareness just by showing up. But he or she can choose, subconsciously or not, between enhancing the image, albeit by tiny steps in all likelihood, or poking a hole in the balloon. And frankly, like an automotive lemon, a bad speech can sour an audience on a brand a lot faster than a great one can build loyalty. But surely, the skeptical executive asks, one speech here or there isn't going to make a difference to my brand. We spend $18 gazillion every year on the most sophisticated advertising. Well, that's what the ad agencies want you to believe anyway. Not that they have too much of a vested interest in driving up their billings. But I digress. There is a growing body of evidence that what really builds brand is not advertising but public relations, of which speech-making is a critical tool. In their recent book, The Fall of Advertising and the Rise of PR, Al and Laura Reese point out that advertising, because it's bought and paid for, lacks credibility, the crucial ingredient of brand building. In case after case, the authors document companies that spent millions of dollars on advertising with no discernible impact, except negative, to their bottom line or market share. They argue that there is too much advertising today for any of it to be memorable. And more fundamentally, they suggest that people are sophisticated enough to understand that ads are all one-sided and don't tell the whole story. Microsoft reportedly spent $1 billion in advertising for the worldwide launch of Windows XP, they wrote in one instance. But what will motivate prospects to switch from Windows 98, Windows Me, or Windows 2000 to Windows XP? Certainly not what they read in the advertising. They will make their decisions based on the thousands of publicity stories that have run in the media. And I would submit on people's perception of Bill Gates and his lieutenants, gleaned from media stories and the endless round of in-person speeches they make. A few months ago I was whisked breathlessly, my host, not me, to breakfast with Bill. an intimate affair in which my host and I, and another 1,498 people, gathered in a cavernous convention center room like acolytes looking for loaves and fishes. We each received a T-shirt, squeezed into a capsule not much larger than a tube of lip balm. "I had breakfast with Bill Gates," it read, reinforcing the brand and the message every time we put the thing on to mow the lawn. That aside, whether we were a fan or not, here was a chance to see the richest man in the world, the leader of this incredible venture, and assess him on a very human level. He was, in that appearance, in that moment, the brand itself, larger than life in some ways, but also clearly one of us, for it sure looked like he puts his pants on one leg at a time. It's the same brand personification, although to a far lesser extent, for any speaker from any organization. What the audience is seeing in the speaker, what they're getting to know and judge in a particularly personal way, is the organization itself. What sort of organization is it that would put this person in a position of influence, that would feel comfortable having this person speak for it? For these appearances, for those moments, the speaker is the brand. That's why mediocrity should never be acceptable. That's why every aspect of an appearance should get the same attention as the design of a store or the thrust of an ad campaign. The speaker's dress, haircuts, arm gestures are all important because they will form immediate associations for the audience with the speaker and the organization. Where the speaker appears on the agenda says something about the clout of the organization. Whether the speaker reads notes or talks to slides or just tells stories, all these go to the executive's command of the subject, of course, but also to his or her knowledge of the organization and the issues it faces. Credibility, in other words. It's not rocket science. When you see a speaker who looks right for the job, whatever that look might be, who stimulates your mind, someone with whom you wouldn't mind sitting down to coffee, you are at least a little predisposed to look twice at the organization he or she represents. You've made a connection with the brand. But you're not going to make that connection with a speaker who achieves mediocrity, who does not stand out from the pack on the podium. And for those in the pack, they've just wasted your time and money as well as their own. They might just as well not have bothered. Restoring confidence. This brand-building potential of a memorable speech extends beyond the speaker's organization. Today, business, especially big business, is overdrawn on its public confidence account, thanks to the hysterical, tail-chasing market optimism of the dot-com period, and more important, the shenanigans of the leaders at companies such as Enron, WorldCom, Anderson, Adelphia. And, well, to our shame, the list goes on, doesn't it, Martha? In this time of soul-searching, there is an urgent need to restore trust in the species known as the business leader, understanding that what one can lose overnight cannot be restored in the same time frame. Only by aggressively addressing the issues of trust will corporations regain the flexibility and freedom they need to attract the resources necessary to serve their customers and shareholders. And that means many small trust-building actions. The question is, where do speeches fit, given that a speech, by definition, is all talk and no action? Good question, but it sells short the impact that a person standing up in front of a room full of strangers can have simply by making a public commitment and reinforcing over and over again how he or she and the organization are living up to the promise. What happens in an effective, memorable speech is primarily a connection between the speaker and the audience, a connection on a fundamentally human level. It is not about statistics or anecdotes, but about the implicit contract between speaker and audience. This is the truth as I know it. These are the issues as I perceive them, and this is what I propose to do about it, the speaker says. If the speaker is good, the argument sound, the approach credible, the audience will reply with a collective, "We believe you," or at least, "We'll wait and see." If the speaker prevaricates, obfuscates, or just skates, the audience will remain skeptical, verging on cynical, and every business leader sinks a little along with the speaker. Respecting the audience. Finally, it's about respecting your audience. Not settling for good enough, but aspiring to deliver real value, ideas they can learn from.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?